One moment they were here, the next, gone. No clues, no goodbyes, just an empty space and unanswered questions. Families were left wondering if they'd ever see them again. Years later, some returned, shocking everyone, bringing secrets and mysteries that will make your skin crawl. These are the stories that defy explanation, blur reality, and prove that the world is stranger than fiction. This is 1 hour of people who disappeared, then reappeared years later. It was 1991 in a small village in eastern Romania. Vasile Gorgos, a 63-year-old farmer, left home for what was supposed to be a short business trip. He regularly traveled to sell cattle and always returned on time. On this trip, he left with a return train ticket in hand, promising his family he'd be back soon. But this time, he never came back. As hours turned into days, his family became anxious. Vasile was known to keep in touch and never strayed from routine. When they couldn't reach him, they alerted the police. A search was launched, but no trace of him was found. Days passed, then weeks, then months, with no answers. It didn't make sense. He was a man of habit, and his sudden disappearance left his family and community stunned. Eventually, his loved ones accepted the worst. With no signs of him anywhere, they believed he had passed away. Memorial services were held in his honor, and life moved on. The mystery of what happened to Vasile slowly faded as years went by. But then something strange happened. On August 29, 2021, 30 years later, a car pulled up at the gate of the Gorgos family farm. An elderly man stepped out. To their shock, it was Vasile. He looked confused, as if he didn't recognize his own home. He was now 93 years old, but something was even more unsettling. He was wearing the same clothes he had on the day he vanished. The family was stunned. The man who had been gone for 3 decades was suddenly standing in front of them. Vasile looked lost, both physically and mentally. He didn't seem to remember much about his life or even his children. When asked where he had been, he gave a single word: home. But he couldn't explain what had happened during the missing years. One detail that stood out was the car that dropped him off. It sped away so fast that no one could get a look at the license plate. And in Vasile's pocket, a valid train ticket for the same route he took the day he disappeared: Bacău to Ploiești. Medical tests showed Vasile was in surprisingly good health for his age. While doctors found some neurological issues, they said it was likely due to aging. But his memory of the past 30 years was gone. He remembered his birth year, and that his wife had passed but had trouble recognizing his own son and daughter. Theories about what happened to Vasile quickly spread. Some thought he had left on his own to start a new life. Others believed he might have been taken in by someone and forced to live under a new identity. That could explain the same clothes. Maybe he had been held somewhere and only released when he could no longer work. There were also suggestions from mental health professionals. One idea was that Vasile could have been living with a memory-related condition, which might have led him to live a different life without realizing it. But experts pointed out that it was rare for such a condition to last uninterrupted for 30 years. A darker theory suggested that Vasile may have been taken and forced into labor and only brought back when he was no longer able to continue. This would explain his confusion, the lack of memories, and the sudden return without warning. Of course, some believed in more unusual ideas, alien encounters, secret government experiments, but these had no solid evidence to support them. To this day, no one knows what really happened. Not Vasile, not his family, and not the authorities. His son later said, "We don't understand him. He doesn't know what he's saying. He talks about the time when he used to sell cattle. We ask one thing. He tells us something else. Maybe someone kept him. Who knows what life he lived?" The return of Vasile Gorgos didn't bring closure. It only opened more questions. His disappearance and reappearance remains one of Romania's strangest unsolved mysteries, and for his family, the search for answers may never end. It was February 8, 2002 in Lidditz, Pennsylvania. Brenda Heist, a 42-year-old mother of 2, had just dropped off her children, 8-year-old Morgan and 12-year-old Lee, at school. It was a normal morning, but everything changed not long after. Brenda had been going through a difficult time. Her marriage was falling apart, money was tight, and she had just been denied housing assistance. Feeling hopeless, she sat alone in a park, crying. As she sat there, a group of homeless individuals noticed her. They approached her, asked if she was okay, and listened as she opened up about her situation. Then they made an unexpected offer. She could come with them to Florida. In a split-second decision, Brenda agreed. She walked away from her life, her kids, and her home, and never looked back. For the next 11 years, Brenda lived in secret. She adopted new names, first Kelsey Lyanne Smith, then others over time. Her old identity was gone. In Florida, she spent her first 2 years living under bridges, getting by on leftover food from restaurants. It was a harsh life, but eventually things started to shift. She met a man, and they lived together in a camper for several years, doing odd jobs like cleaning boats and working as day laborers. When that relationship ended, she ended up on the streets again, but over time managed to rebuild some stability. Brenda began working as a house cleaner and made new friends, including a woman named Sandra Forrester, whom she eventually moved in with. During this period, Brenda went by the name Lovey Smith. She told everyone she was a widow with no children. In reality, her children were still in Pennsylvania, growing up without any answers. Forrester said she never knew who Brenda really was. Brenda had made up stories about a husband named Lee who worked for Marriott and had passed away after traveling the world. Still, little details didn't add up. One of Forrester's sons, around the same age Brenda's son would have been, mentioned the name Heist. When asked about it, he admitted Brenda had told him that was her real last name. Meanwhile, Brenda's family had spent over a decade wondering what had happened. Her children believed something terrible had occurred. Her husband, Lee Sr., was even considered a suspect for a time but was eventually cleared. In 2010, with no leads and no hope, he had Brenda declared legally deceased to find closure. Then in 2013, everything changed. Brenda, now 53, walked into a Florida police station and revealed who she really was. She had been arrested for a probation violation, and her alias triggered a deeper investigation. That's when authorities learned the truth. Brenda Heist, missing for 11 years, was alive. She told police she left because she'd reached an emotional breaking point. The pressures of life had overwhelmed her, and in a moment of despair, she made a choice she couldn't take back. She explained that she had thought about her family every day but never made contact. Her return stunned everyone. Morgan, now an adult, shared her anger online, saying she had spent years grieving, never knowing her mother had walked away by choice. She said she hoped to forgive one day, but only for her own peace. Her father, Lee Sr., also struggled with the news. After everything, years of suspicion and pain, he said he didn't plan to visit Brenda but was trying to move forward. Even Brenda's own mother was left shaken. The truth had finally come out, but the damage had already been done. Brenda expressed regret, admitting she never thought it would go this far and that she never imagined how much her absence would hurt those she left behind. Brenda now faces charges related to forgery, stolen identities, and drug possession. She's also dealing with the emotional weight of returning to a life she abandoned. Her children are left to rebuild from a past they never expected. The future for Brenda remains uncertain, but for her family, the scars are already there. It was February 20th, 1978 in Saugatuck, Michigan. The weather was freezing and snow covered everything. That morning, 23-year-old Stephen Kubacki, a student at Hope College, went on a solo cross-country ski trip near Lake Michigan. He had done trips like this before, and it was expected to last only a day or two. Stephen was a smart and independent student, studying either German or history at a Christian college in Holland, Michigan. His professors thought he was gifted, and his classmates said he enjoyed nature and had strong opinions. He lived off campus and usually kept to himself. He had climbed mountains in Europe and liked playing role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. He only had 3 classes left before graduating and already had a job lined up at a local newspaper. His life seemed to be going in the right direction, but when he didn't return the next day, his family became worried and contacted the police. Soon, snowmobilers found something strange near the lake. A pair of skis was standing in the snow, the poles were upright, and a backpack had been placed neatly on top. It didn't look like an accident. Everything was arranged too perfectly. A trail of footprints led about 200 yards toward the frozen lake, then suddenly stopped. Authorities thought Stephen may have fallen through the ice, but there were no signs of a struggle. No blood, no extra footprints. Just one set of tracks that ended at the lake's edge. Search teams, including the Coast Guard, state police, and volunteers, used helicopters, boats, and even drones to search the area. But they found nothing. Some people didn't believe he had fallen into the lake. His roommate said Stephen had talked about his skiing plans openly. If he had wanted to leave on purpose, he would have given some sort of clue. Police questioned other students. Some thought it was planned, others thought it was an accident. One student, whose name was blacked out in the police reports, left school shortly after Stephen disappeared. She was upset, left a note for her roommate, and went to live with her aunt in Grand Rapids. Investigators thought she might have known something, but there was no proof. A couple reported seeing someone who resembled Stephen walking on the ice the day before the skis were found, with a woman nearby taking pictures. She was never identified. Stephen had no known girlfriends in Michigan, and his past relationships were in Europe. His family also received strange phone calls. One caller provided a phone number they claimed could reach Stephen, but it had been disconnected. Later, Stephen's mother discovered she had spoken to him using that number 6 months earlier for 15 minutes. The number was deactivated shortly after, and although police traced it, the name was never released. Stephen's brother didn't believe the drowning theory either. He hired a private investigator from a group called the Fat Man Detective Service. That investigator believed Stephen might have gone to Germany to meet someone, but no airline had any records of Stephen flying. 15 months passed. Then, on May 5, 1979, Stephen suddenly woke up on a grassy hill in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, 739 miles away. He didn't remember anything from the past year and 3 months. His last memory was standing near the lake, feeling cold and scared. He was wearing different clothes, a Wisconsin marathon shirt, sneakers, and glasses he didn't recognize. He had $40 in cash and a satchel full of maps and hitchhiking signs for places like San Francisco, Reno, and Chicago. Stephen walked 20 miles to his aunt's house and contacted his father. His family had believed he was gone forever. He told reporters he only realized how much time had passed after reading a newspaper, suspecting the cold or exhaustion caused his memory loss. Though he felt fine before the trip, he refused mental health evaluations. He didn't take the newspaper job, but Hope College awarded him his degree. Stephen later moved to the Pacific Northwest, became a psychologist, and wrote a book about math and existence. He never discussed the incident again, and neither did his family. Some people link his case to the Lake Michigan Triangle, an area known for strange events, boats spinning in circles, sudden weather changes, and planes vanishing. To this day, no one knows what really happened. The perfectly arranged skis, the backpack, and the sudden reappearance far from home all remain unanswered questions. Stephen Kubaki's story is still one of the most puzzling missing person cases in American history. It was 30th, 1902 in New York City. Dr. William Horatio Bates, a respected eye specialist, was 41 years old and well known in his field. He had a solid reputation, medical degrees from Cornell and Columbia, and was known for his surgical skill. That day, he wrote a short letter to his wife, Ada Seaman Bates, who was staying with her mother. In it, he mentioned traveling with a former student, Dr. Forsch, for cataract surgeries and the good pay. He also noted missing the upcoming horse show. The letter seemed cheerful but odd, as he was already financially secure, making his excitement about the money unclear. But Ada didn't think much of it. Dr. Bates often traveled for work. At first, there was no reason to worry. Then the letters stopped. A few days passed, then weeks. Aida began contacting his friends and co-workers, trying to figure out where he went. No one knew anything. She finally asked the Freemasons, an international organization Dr. Bates belonged to, for help. They launched a worldwide search, sharing his photo and description through their global network. About 6 weeks later, someone matching his description was found at Charing Cross Hospital in London. He was thin, weak, and disoriented, and friends who visited said he seemed unrecognizable. He even admitted he hadn't eaten in days, despite having money in his account. Ada quickly traveled to London and was shocked to find he didn't recognize her. Still, she convinced him to stay with her at the Savoy Hotel. During his stay, he mentioned operating on a patient with a brain issue but couldn't recall anything else. Then, 2 days later, he quietly vanished again. Aida never saw him after that. She spent years looking for him across Europe and the United States, but there were no more leads. She passed away in 1907, never learning what truly happened to her husband. At the time of his disappearance, Dr. Bates had a solid reputation. He was admired in medical circles and held teaching positions at leading hospitals. His sudden disappearance left people confused. Then, in 1910, 8 years later, he reappeared. A New York doctor spotted him in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Dr. Bates had set up a small practice and was treating patients. He still didn't remember his past. The doctor convinced him to return to New York, where they opened a clinic together. But by then, much had changed. His name no longer carried the same weight, and the medical world had moved on. In 1917, he introduced a new method he called the Bates System of Eye Exercises. He published his ideas in a magazine known for unverified health claims. Dr. Bates argued that most vision problems came from mental stress and that glasses weren't necessary. His approach involved eye movement exercises, looking at the color black, and even staring into the sun, practices considered unsafe and lacking scientific support. Despite the criticism, many people were drawn to his ideas. Some even claimed they no longer needed glasses. One of his most notable supporters was Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, who promoted the method in his own book. In 1929, Dr. Bates faced backlash for spreading what many saw as misleading medical claims. Still, his method continued gaining attention, and even today, some people discuss it online, though experts warn against it. But his story didn't end there. In 1928, another strange event occurred. His son, Charles Halsey Bates, suddenly vanished and was never found. When Dr. Bates died in 1931 at the age of 70, Charles was still missing and not mentioned in the will. Dr. William Bates went from being one of the most respected names in eye care to a man whose life was marked by mystery, loss, and unanswered questions. Whether his strange disappearance was caused by memory loss, personal issues, or something deeper, only he knew what really happened, and he never told anyone. September 20th, 2007, in Maple Valley, Washington, a small town just outside Seattle. Tanya Ryder, 33, had just finished her night shift at a local supermarket. She and her husband Tom were both working long hours, juggling multiple jobs to save money for a house. That morning, after work, she planned to head home, rest for a bit, then leave for her second job at a clothing store. But Tanya never made it home. Minutes from home, Tanya's blue Honda Sport utility vehicle veered off the road, crashing into a ravine and landing in thick blackberry bushes hidden from view. She was seriously injured, her leg crushed, ribs and spine broken, and shoulder dislocated. Her seatbelt pinned her in place, and her phone was just out of reach. Unable to move, she focused on surviving. At first, Tom thought little of her absence, as their work schedules kept them apart for long periods. But when Tanya missed her shift at the store, her coworker called him, and he realized something was wrong. He immediately reported her missing to the police. But authorities didn't take it seriously. They said Tanya was an adult and had the right to leave without notice. Tom begged them to track her phone, but they refused. Frustrated and desperate, he kept pushing. It took days before police finally opened an investigation. Tom knew she wouldn't just vanish like that. They eventually traced her phone near Highway 169 and began searching the area. It wasn't until 8 days later that officers finally found her car, just 20 feet from the road, hidden by heavy brush. Tanya had been trapped inside the wreck the entire time with no food or water. Her injuries were life-threatening, and she had passed in and out of consciousness for days. Dehydration was causing kidney failure, and the pain was unbearable. Her phone lit up with missed calls, but she couldn't reach it. In her daze, Tanya imagined things. At one point, she thought she saw her childhood dog. Cars passed nearby, but no one saw her. Each hour felt endless. She hoped someone, maybe Tom, would notice she was missing and check her usual route. But the thick plants hid her car completely. She was utterly alone. Then, on the 8th day, she heard voices. At first, she thought she was dreaming, but the sounds got closer until someone shouted, "She's alive!" Rescue crews pulled her from the wreck and rushed her to Harborview Medical Center. Her condition was critical. Her leg was nearly beyond saving. Her collarbone, ribs, and spine were broken. Doctors warned that she had come dangerously close to not making it. When she woke up, Tom was there. He hadn't stopped searching. Doctors said her survival likely came down to her age, overall health, and the fact that she had been wearing a seatbelt. But the damage wasn't just physical. Tanya couldn't remember the crash. Her recovery would take years, both mentally and physically. Tom later spoke out about the delays and how the system failed them. He said any policy that blocked officers from taking fast action in a case like this needed to be changed. He believed those lost days could have made all the difference. Tanya eventually shared her story in a book titled Missing Without a Trace: 8 Days of Horror. In it, she talked about what it was like to be stuck for over a week and how she fought to survive. Her case also raised concerns about how missing adult cases were handled. Tanya's experience showed how quickly things can go wrong and how slow responses can cost lives. Even now, the scars from that time remain. But Tanya continues to move forward. She survived something few people could, and her story reminds us how easily someone can disappear and how hard it can be to bring them back. It was March 21st, 2002, in Seaton Carew, a quiet coastal town in England. John Darwin, a 51-year-old former teacher and prison officer, told his wife Anne he was going kayaking in the North Sea. The weather was calm, but John never came back. When he didn't show up to work the next day, a large search was launched, covering over 60 square miles of coastline. The only things found were a damaged paddle and pieces of his kayak. Everyone assumed he had lost his life at sea. Anne was heartbroken, and their two sons, Mark and Anthony, believed their father was gone for good. Although the law normally requires a 7-year wait to declare someone legally dead, Anne applied for a death certificate just a year later. She received it and collected around £250,000 from insurance and other financial support. But John wasn't actually gone. He had secretly returned and was living in a house the couple owned right next to their main home. The two buildings were connected through a hidden door disguised as a wardrobe. Whenever someone visited or when their sons stayed over, John would quietly move into the other house and stay out of sight. In public, he sometimes walked around in disguise, wearing a fake beard and using another name. A few neighbors spotted him, but no one said anything. When a tenant once asked questions, John just told them to keep quiet. Anne continued to pretend she was grieving while still living with John in secret. Their finances were in bad shape. By the year 2000, they were deeply in debt, owing tens of thousands of pounds on unpaid credit cards and loans. Anne later said she didn't want to be part of John's plan, but claimed she felt stuck when he came back. According to her, John threatened to blame everything on her if she exposed him. Whether or not that was true, she eventually helped cover it up, lying to the police, their sons, and even close friends. By 2004, the couple started planning a permanent move abroad. They looked into relocating to Cyprus and even considered buying a boat in Spain. John later used a fake name, John Jones, based on the identity of a child who had passed away in 1950. He also used the name John Williams during a trip to the U.S., where he met someone he had connected with online. Eventually, they focused on Panama. In 2006, they traveled there and were photographed by a real estate agent while looking at properties. That photo would later come back to expose everything. Back in the UK, John kept hiding while Anne sent money to Panama. She sold their house, which had been transferred to their son's name, for £295,000 and used the money to buy a tropical estate worth £200,000. But in 2007, Panama changed its visa rules, now requiring proper identification. John knew his fake name wouldn't pass, so on December 1, 2007, he returned to the UK and walked into a police station saying he had memory loss and didn't remember the past 5 years. Anne, still in Panama, acted surprised, but police were already investigating. A co-worker had reported suspicious behavior, and they found documents showing property sales and money transfers. Then someone searched John and Panama online and discovered the real estate photo of them together. It was sent to a newspaper and published. The secret was out. John was arrested at his son's house. Anne was arrested at the airport. Both were charged with fraud. Their sons were crushed. They had believed their father was gone. Now they knew he'd been hiding all along. In July 2008, John and Anne were both sentenced to over 6 years in prison. John admitted everything. Anne denied it but was still found guilty. They were released in 2011 and later divorced. Anne rebuilt her life and reconnected with her sons. John remarried and moved to the Philippines. In 2022, his wife claimed he planned to travel to Ukraine, taking a bulletproof vest and good life insurance with him. John Darwin is now 75. His story has inspired books, a podcast, and a TV series. But for Mark and Anthony, it's a personal story of betrayal hidden behind a wall. It was May 20th, 1985, in Tacoma, Washington. Jody Roberts, a 27-year-old crime reporter for the News Tribune, was supposed to cover a story at Pacific Lutheran University, but she never showed up. This was out of character. Jody was a dependable and serious journalist. However, her recent behavior had changed. She seemed withdrawn, messy, and not herself. And now she was gone. When her co-workers couldn't reach her, a few went to check on her at home. What they found raised alarm. The house was in disarray. Dirty laundry, piles of unopened mail, and her cat's waste on the floor. Her cat Poika was outside crying. Jody never let her cat out. Something felt very wrong. Jody had joined the paper at 22 and earned respect covering crime and court cases. But in early 1985, friends noticed something was off. Her phone had been disconnected. She was behind on bills. She had started seeing a counselor and said even basic tasks had become overwhelming. In mid-May, she asked her boss for a short break with her friend Mike Bainter, a photo editor. Her request was denied. Still, she went to work on Friday, May 17th. That was the last time anyone from her office saw her. On Saturday night, she went bar hopping with friends in Gig Harbor, then attended a small gathering near Purdy. At the party, she grew attached to a puppy and even offered to buy it. Around 3:30 a.m., she said goodbye and left. Her home in Wana was only about 10 minutes away. A neighbor later noticed a red car in her driveway, possibly her 1983 Toyota Corolla. By Monday, she was missing. She didn't report to work or answer calls. At around 10:30 a.m., she withdrew $80 and cashed a check for $350 at a Federal Way bank, leaving her account overdrawn by $20. She signed her full name on the slip. That was the last known trace of her. The next day, her parents were contacted. They hadn't heard from her either. A missing person report was filed and police entered her home that evening. It was still messy, but the most concerning detail was Poika being left behind, something Jody never would have done. Investigators only had one lead, the bank transaction. Later, her car was found in a rented parking space used by the News Tribune. Inside were fast food wrappers, unopened mail, and scattered papers. There was no sign of foul play. Police believe she may have returned the car herself and left by bus. Then 5 days later, Jody was found in Aurora, Colorado. She was wearing a University of Denver sweatshirt, had no ID, and didn't know her name. She carried a Toyota keyring and a copy of Watership Down. A mall security guard took her to Fort Logan Mental Health Center. Doctors said she was intelligent and seemed well educated, but she couldn't remember anything about her life. Under medication sometimes used to help recover memories, she mentioned siblings, Ann, Sal, and someone named Shorty. Some details were close to real, but most were unclear. She was diagnosed with psychogenic amnesia, a type of memory loss linked to emotional stress. Her photo was shared locally, but no one recognized her. Social workers helped her start over. She called herself Jane D., believed she was born on January 1st, 1963, and eventually moved to Alaska. There she worked as a waitress, met a man named Dan Williams, and had 2 sets of twins. She never brought up her past. 12 years later, in 1997, a sheriff's captain reopened the case. A newspaper article led a woman in Alaska to recognize her. When police contacted Jane, she still didn't remember being Jody. But after speaking with investigators, she agreed to reconnect with her family. She uploaded a photo to a private site. Her father confirmed it was her. She gave just one interview saying her memories never returned. Her family accepted that. Today she lives quietly in Oregon, caring for her mother and raising her children. As for those 5 missing days, what really happened remains unknown. It was a normal day in the forests of Tuscany, Italy, until 2 mushroom pickers came across something unexpected. Near Cala Violina, a quiet spot along the Maremma coast, they found a man living deep in the woods. He had a thick beard, a dirty face, and looked like he had been surviving there for years. When asked who he was, he calmly said, "I am Spanish. My name is Carlos, and I have lived here for 20 years. This wasn't just anyone. The man identified himself as Carlos Sanchez Ortiz de Salazar, a name that had once made national news. Back in 1995, Carlos had vanished from his home in Seville, Spain. He was a 26-year-old doctor who had been quietly battling serious emotional struggles. One day, without warning, he walked away from everything: his family, his career, and his life. After years of silence, Carlos was legally declared dead in 2010. His family had mourned, accepted the loss, and tried to move on. But he hadn't died. Instead, he had been living alone, off the grid, in the forests of Italy. When the mushroom pickers met him, Carlos didn't seem interested in reconnecting with the outside world. He showed them his old passport to confirm who he was, but made it clear that he wanted to be left alone. "Now I must escape," he told them before disappearing once again. Before he left, the pickers took photos of his ID and contacted Penelope, an Italian group that helps families of missing persons. Through this group, word reached the Spanish authorities, who then got in touch with Carlos's family. His parents, Amelia and his father, rushed to Tuscany, hoping to finally see their son again after 20 years of wondering what had happened to him. But by the time they arrived, Carlos was gone. His campsite, made from a tarp tied between trees and a few jerry cans used to collect rainwater, had been taken down. There was no sign of him. His parents began searching the forest themselves, desperate for even a glimpse of him. Carlos's disappearance had been driven by emotional pain. It was clear he didn't want to return to his old life. Nature had become his escape. He had lived in total isolation for 2 decades, avoiding all human contact. To him, the forest was more comforting than anything the world had to offer. His mother, Amelia, confirmed that the ID was real. "That's him. He is alive, and that is the most important thing," she said. Still, she understood that he might not want to come back. "We respect his freedom," she added, "but we won't leave until we've held him in our arms, even if it's just once more." Carlos's sister, Olga, shared a message of gratitude. "Thank you for giving us hope, even a little relief, after all these painful years," she posted online. Local residents said they had occasionally seen a quiet man walking through the woods, but no one had ever approached him. He had become almost like a ghost, someone who lived alongside the world but didn't take part in it. Despite being found, Carlos's story remains unfinished. He returned to the shadows as quickly as he had come out of them. His family is left hoping that maybe one day he'll choose to come back, or at least let them know he's okay. Carlos's story reminds us that sometimes people don't vanish to be found. Some are running from pain they can't explain. In the quiet of the forest, Carlos may have found something he couldn't get anywhere else: silence, space, and peace. Whether he'll ever be seen again is unknown, but for now, his story lives on, in the trees of Tuscany, in the hearts of his family, and in the questions he left behind. It was the summer of 1981 in Seaside, California. 13-year-old Mary Louise Day lived with her mother, Charlotte, and her stepfather, William Hoole, a military man stationed at nearby Fort Ord. Mary's early life had been unstable, marked by time in foster care, a difficult family life, and her mother's multiple marriages. Just before Mary vanished, an argument broke out between her and William. That night would be the last time anyone saw her. Her disappearance raised immediate questions. Her younger sisters, Kathy and Sherry, were told that Mary had run away, but no one filed a missing persons report, not even her parents, and for years, no one talked about her. It wasn't until 1994, over a decade later, that Sherry, now an adult, reported Mary missing. That step reopened a case that would only grow stranger over time. When investigators looked into it, they discovered troubling details. William had a known history of being aggressive toward Mary. During a police interview in 2003, he admitted to being furious with her on the night she vanished, accusing her of harming his dog. He said he had lost control and may have hurt her, though he stopped short of making any direct admissions. At one point, he told investigators that, "A demon inside me could have killed Mary," a disturbing statement that deepened suspicions around him. Evidence also began pointing to something more serious. Cadaver dogs alerted authorities to possible human remains at 2 properties connected to the family, one where Mary had lived and another where they moved afterward. At the first home, a buried teddy bear, a child's shoe, and a belt buckle were found, though no remains were uncovered. It was believed that Mary's body may have once been buried there and later moved in an attempt to cover up what had happened. Despite all of this, no arrests were made, and the case hit a wall until 2003, when something unexpected happened. In Phoenix, Arizona, a woman was pulled over in a routine traffic stop. She identified herself as Mary Louise Day and had a valid driver's license to prove it. This discovery shocked everyone. The woman seemed to know basic facts about Mary's past, like her mother's name, but couldn't recall key events, especially the argument involving the dog. DNA tests showed she was Charlotte's biological daughter. Still, police weren't convinced. She spoke with a heavy Southern accent, even though Mary had spent her entire life in California. Experts said it was unlikely she developed that accent without years of living in the South. Her version of events didn't line up with what authorities and Mary's family knew. This woman, dubbed Phoenix Mary, raised serious doubts. Another detail made things even murkier. Her ID had only been issued 3 weeks before she was stopped by police. Investigators began to wonder, had someone deliberately found a woman to pose as Mary to throw off the investigation? Could Phoenix Mary have been a hidden daughter of Charlotte's, used to distract authorities? Facial recognition technology brought a glimmer of hope. A photo taken about a year after Mary vanished showed a girl who looked just like her. The software determined there was a 99% match. This was enough for Sherry to believe the woman in Phoenix was truly her long-lost sister. She had always hoped Mary had survived, and the photo gave her something solid to hold on to. Sherry eventually traveled to Arizona to meet the woman in person, just before her death in 2017. She described the meeting as emotional, saying it gave her a sense of peace after so many years. But investigators remained unsure. The inconsistencies in her story, her accent, and her limited memory continued to cast doubt. In 2017, the case was officially closed. The Seaside Police Department declared that the woman found in Phoenix was indeed Mary Louise Day. Still, for Sherry and others close to the case, doubts lingered. Had they really found Mary, or had they been misled by a carefully staged lie? The mystery of Mary Louise Day, who some called the girl who died twice, remains one of the most confusing missing person cases in recent memory. Though the case is closed, the questions surrounding Mary's disappearance and reappearance continue to haunt those who knew her and followed her story. It was the fall of 1965 in Columbus, Nebraska. Two people, Jacqueline Jackie Raines Crackman, 18, and Melvin Uphoff, 31, vanished without warning. Jackie was a young mother of 2 and Melvin was a father of 4. Their disappearances shocked the small town and left their families confused. What made the case even more puzzling was the lack of evidence and the unusual events surrounding both of them. At the time, both Jackie and Melvin were married to other people. Jackie lived just outside Columbus with her husband and children. Melvin worked as the manager of a local co-op and had a family of his own. Even though they were committed to other relationships, the two had quietly started seeing each other. Their relationship wasn't widely known until right before they disappeared. Jackie was the first to go missing. On September 24, 1965, she vanished from Columbus. Her family was immediately worried. Jackie had left her 2 young children behind, which didn't make sense to anyone who knew her. Her brother Jim later said, "For her to just leave and not come back, that's not my sister." The family couldn't understand what had happened, especially since there was no clue as to where she had gone or why she would leave so suddenly. A month later, on October 24th, Melvin disappeared too. His wife noticed something was off in the days leading up to it. He had been acting strangely, especially after Jackie visited their home and admitted to the affair. After that visit, Melvin's behavior changed. Then one day, he was just gone, along with his car, belongings, and even his coin collection. At the time, many believed Jackie and Melvin had run off together. Jackie had once told her family she would leave when her ship came in, which made some think she had planned it. But their families had doubts. Neither of them seemed like the kind of person who would leave their kids behind and never look back. There were also worries that something worse might have happened, but there was no proof of that either. For decades, the case went cold. Investigators followed every lead they could, but nothing solid came up. Jackie and Melvin remained missing, and their families were left without answers. Then, in 2009, 44 years later, everything changed. Police got a tip from an anonymous source. It led them to something no one expected. Jackie and Melvin were alive. After all that time, they had been living under new identities in another city, far from Nebraska. Investigators were able to confirm it after speaking with them on the phone, but the couple refused to share more. They said they wanted to be left alone and asked for their privacy to be respected. The news was shocking. Melvin's daughter, Michelle, said she couldn't understand how a parent could walk away from their children like that. "I'm a mom, and I can't imagine leaving my boys and never seeing them again," she said. That confusion was shared by both families. The hardest part wasn't just that Jackie and Melvin had left. It was not knowing why. Why would they abandon their kids and their lives? What could have pushed them to make such a decision? No one ever got a clear answer. The couple kept their reasons private, and police didn't release any further details. When the story came out in 2009, there was no outrage, just a mix of shock, relief, and pain. Their families had lived for decades thinking something terrible had happened, and now they had to come to terms with the fact that Jackie and Melvin had simply chosen to start over. In the end, this case wasn't about a crime or a tragic ending. It was about 2 people who made a choice to leave everything behind. That decision changed the lives of everyone connected to them. And while their reasons may never be fully understood, the impact of what they did is something their families still live with to this day. It was April 27, 1964, in Chicago, Illinois. Dora Franczak had just given birth to her son, Paul, at Michael Reese Hospital. It should have been a joyful moment. But just hours later, a woman dressed as a nurse entered Dora's room, picked up the newborn, and walked out. She wasn't part of the hospital staff, and she was never seen again. Dora's husband, Chester, was at work when he got the call. He rushed to the hospital only to find out that his son had been taken. Police and staff searched the area, but the woman was gone. A large search began. Over 175,000 postal workers were asked to keep watch. On the first day, police checked hundreds of homes. The Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the investigation. Baby Paul's photo appeared in newspapers across the country, but no clear leads came in. This was before deoxyribonucleic acid testing and security cameras. Investigators compared blood types and features like ear shapes across thousands of babies, but none were a match. Time passed. The trail went cold. Still, the Fronczaks held on to hope. Then, in 1965, a toddler was found sitting in a stroller outside a store in Newark, New Jersey. He had a black eye, was quiet, and looked around Paul's age. Dora believed he was her son. The Federal Bureau of Investigation agreed. The boy was sent home with the Fronczaks. There was no way to confirm it at the time, but they raised him as Paul and never spoke about what had happened again. As the boy grew older, things didn't feel right. When he was 10, he found old news articles and letters hidden in a crawl space at home. They told the story of the kidnapping. When he asked, Dora admitted it was true, but told him everything was fine now. Still, he couldn't ignore how different he looked from his parents and brother. The question stayed with him. By 2012, he was living in Las Vegas and had a family of his own. He decided to take a deoxyribonucleic acid test for himself and his daughter. His parents didn't agree with it, but he moved forward. The results confirmed his fear. He wasn't related to Dora or Chester, and he wasn't the baby taken from the hospital. The case was reopened, and the news spread quickly. His parents didn't speak to him for over a year. His marriage also ended, but he didn't stop searching. In 2015, with help from deoxyribonucleic acid experts and genealogy websites, he discovered his real identity. His name was Jack Rosenthal. He was born on October 27, 1963, in New Jersey, months before the Fronczak baby disappeared. Jack had also gone missing. Then he found something else. He had a twin sister named Jill. Both had vanished at the same time. Jack kept digging. He found that his birth family had struggled. His mother dealt with alcohol issues. His father, a veteran, had a difficult history. Relatives said Jack and Jill were often neglected. Jack had been found. Jill was still missing. Jack feared she might have been left behind, or worse. She had never been found. Then, in 2019, a man named Kevin Beatty in Michigan took a deoxyribonucleic acid test. It showed he was Dora and Chester's biological son. Kevin was the real Paul. He had been raised by another family under a different name. His records had been changed. The woman who raised him had passed away. It's still unknown how she got him. In December 2019, Kevin and Dora spoke on the phone. It was brief but meaningful. They planned to meet, but Kevin was battling cancer. Then the pandemic began. In April 2020, Kevin passed away at 56. His obituary didn't mention his real identity. For Dora, it was another loss. But Jack believed that the final call brought her peace. Today, Jack keeps looking for his sister, Jill, and the truth that's still missing. Because while Paul Fronczak was finally found, one question remains. Where is Jill Rosenthal? August 31, 1998, in Rockhampton, Queensland, Australia. 14-year-old Natasha Ann Ryan was dropped off by her mother at North Rockhampton State High School. Natasha had a history of running away, so when she didn't return that evening, her family didn't panic right away. But as days passed, concern grew. Natasha didn't come home. Police believed she had simply run off again, but something felt different this time. Around that period, other girls and women in the area began disappearing, including a 9-year-old girl and several women between the ages of 19 and 39. The town of Rockhampton, with a population of only about 68,000, quickly became filled with fear. Eventually, police focused on Leonard John Fraser, a convicted offender who had been released in 1997, just before the disappearances started. In April 1999, Fraser was arrested for another offense and sent back to prison. Soon after, he confessed to ending the lives of 5 people. One of the names he mentioned was Natasha Ryan. He told police that he had met her at a movie theater, offered her a ride, then attacked her and left her body in a pond. Her family believed it. On her 17th birthday in 2001, Natasha's parents, Robert and Jenny Ryan, held a memorial service. By then, they had accepted that their daughter was gone. But Fraser had lied. Natasha Ryan was alive, and had been the whole time. Since the day she disappeared in 1998, Natasha had been living just 1 kilometer from her mother's house, hiding with her 21-year-old boyfriend, Scott Black. She had chosen to run away and stay with him. They didn't leave Rockhampton and moved houses a few times, always staying nearby. Scott worked as a milkman and kept a quiet life. Natasha rarely went outside, kept lights low and curtains closed. She only stepped out about 6 times in 4 years, always at night. Even after Fraser claimed responsibility for her death, Natasha didn't come forward. She later said she felt trapped by the lie and was afraid of the consequences. In 2003, just before Fraser's trial for Natasha's supposed death, she called a children's counseling helpline. She gave the name Sally and said someone was about to be wrongly convicted. The call was reported, but the phone couldn't be traced. Later, police received a letter with a phone number and a message. Natasha Ryan is alive and safe. On April 10, 2003, police entered Scott Black's house. Inside a cupboard, they found an 18-year-old girl, pale, frightened, and very much alive. It was Natasha. The next day in court, the prosecution shocked everyone by announcing that Natasha was not gone. Her father was pulled aside and given the news. When he called the police station, a familiar voice came on the line. She told him that it was her, Grasshopper, and that she loved him and was sorry. Her mother, Jenny, admitted that she had been angry at first. She had hated her, but when she saw her, all those feelings faded away. Fraser was cleared in Natasha's case but remained in prison for the other victims. Natasha and Scott faced their own legal issues. In 2005, Scott was sentenced to 1 year in jail for lying to police. Natasha was fined $1,000 and ordered to pay $16,000 toward the cost of the search. Even so, she sold her story to 60 Minutes Australia for $120,000. In 2008, she and Scott got married in front of 35 guests. Her mother attended the wedding. The couple also sold their wedding photos to Woman's Day for $200,000. Later, Natasha changed her name to Tash Black, became a nurse, and had 4 children. For many years, she stayed away from public attention. Then, on June 2, 2024, almost 21 years after being found, Natasha disappeared again. She left her home on foot and was last seen near the Rockhampton golf course. The next morning, her body was discovered. She was 40. Police said there was nothing suspicious about her passing. Friends and family said Natasha's life wasn't perfect, but she tried to move forward. Despite the mistakes, she built a life, had a family, and found a way to begin again, even if only for a while. June 10, 1991, in South Lake Tahoe, California. 11-year-old J.C. Lee Dugard was walking to catch her school bus, just like every other day. Her stepfather, Carl Probin, stood outside watching her walk the short distance to the stop. But something unexpected happened that would change everything. A car pulled up beside J.C. Inside were Philip and Nancy Garrido. Philip used a stun device on her, causing her to collapse, and Nancy quickly pulled her into the vehicle. Carl jumped on his bike and tried to chase them, but they sped away. J.C. had disappeared. Carl immediately contacted the police. Officers arrived fast. Helicopters scanned the area. Search dogs were brought in, and the FBI became involved. Despite all efforts, there was no sign of J.C. She was gone. J.C.'s parents worked hard to keep her case in the public eye, but the pressure took a toll. Carl and Terry's marriage eventually ended. Carl later admitted he felt deep guilt over not being able to stop the abduction. Unbeknownst to anyone, J.C. had been taken to Antioch, California, about 170 miles away. There, she was kept hidden in a backyard compound behind the Garrido's house. It was made up of tents and sheds. That would be her world for the next 18 years. Philip Garrido had a history of serious crimes. In 1976, he was convicted for kidnapping and received a 50-year sentence, but he served only 11 years before being released in 1988. Just 3 years later, he took J.C. Although he was supposed to be monitored, his supervision was minimal. J.C. was forced to take on a new identity, Alyssa. At just 14 years old, she gave birth to her first child. At 17, she had another. Both were fathered by Garrido and delivered in the shed without any medical assistance. She had no access to school, doctors, or anyone outside of the Garridos. She kept a journal writing about her pain and her hopes. In one 2004 entry, she said she felt like she was disappearing, that she no longer had control over her life. In 2006, she wrote a list of goals. At the top was, "See Mom." Parole officers visited the house several times but never checked the backyard closely. They saw the overgrown grass and messy yard, but nothing raised serious alarm. Then, on August 24, 2009, Philip brought his two daughters to the University of California, Berkeley. Campus police felt something was off. A background check showed he was a registered offender, but there was no record of him having children. They alerted his parole officer. The next day, Philip came in with Nancy, the girls, and a young woman who called herself Alyssa. After some questioning, the truth came out. She was J.C. Dugard. 18 years after she was taken, she was finally found. J.C. and her daughters were placed under protective care. She was able to say her real name again and reunite with her mother. The public was stunned. How could someone live in a backyard for almost 2 decades without being noticed? J.C. slowly started rebuilding her life. She wrote 2 books, A Stolen Life and Freedom, My Book of Firsts, sharing her journey. She also fulfilled most of the goals from her old list, including learning to drive and reconnecting with her mom. She later launched the J.C. Foundation to help families affected by trauma. In interviews, she spoke about how she had to relearn how to make everyday decisions, like choosing what to eat. Philip Garrido was sentenced to 431 years to life. Nancy received 36 years to life. Neither will ever be released. J.C.'s case exposed deep flaws in how certain individuals are monitored. Despite regular visits, officers never uncovered the truth, until one of them finally asked the right question. Her story isn't just about what she went through. It's about what she chose to do after finally gaining her freedom. It was December 4th, 1972 in Merced, California. 7-year-old Stephen Stainer was walking home from school. He was in 2nd grade and the third of 5 children. He lived with his parents, Delbert and Kay, along with his older brother Carrie and 3 sisters in a quiet neighborhood. But that afternoon, Stephen didn't come home. While walking, Stephen was approached by Irvin Murphy. He was known to be easily influenced and had recently met a man named Kenneth Parnell. Parnell claimed to be a preacher and told Murphy he wanted help raising a boy in faith. In reality, Parnell had a long record of harming children. Murphy was handing out religious pamphlets when he saw Stephen and asked if his mother would donate items to their church. Stephen said yes. Then Murphy asked him to show where he lived. When Stephen agreed, a white Buick pulled up with Parnell behind the wheel. Stephen got in, but instead of being taken home, he was driven 38 miles away to a cabin in Cathys Valley. That same night, Parnell started mistreating Stephen. Less than 2 weeks later, on December 17th, it became ongoing. When Stephen asked to go home, Parnell lied and said his parents didn't want him anymore, that they had too many kids and had given him up. Stephen, just 7, believed him. Parnell gave Stephen a new name, Dennis Gregory Parnell, and kept his real birth date to make the story seem more real. For the next 7 years, they moved around California, living in places like Santa Rosa and Comch. Stephen was enrolled in schools as Parnell's son. He was allowed to smoke, drink, and go out freely. Parnell even gave him a dog named Queenie. For about 18 months, a woman named Barbara Mathias lived with them. Stephen later said she took part in the mistreatment when he was 9. She claimed she didn't know he had been taken. In 1975, she even tried to help Parnell take another boy, but it didn't work. Parnell often left Stephen home alone while he worked. Stephen admitted later that he could have left, but believed he had nowhere to go. As time went on, Parnell began planning to take another child. He asked Stephen to help, but Stephen made sure each attempt failed. Eventually, Parnell asked Stephen's teenage friend Randall Poorman to help. On February 14, 1980, they took 5-year-old Timothy White in Ukiah. When Stephen saw how upset the boy was, he knew he had to act. On March 1, 1980, while Parnell was at work, Stephen took Timothy and left. They hitchhiked around 50 miles but couldn't find Timothy's home, so Stephen brought him to the police. He told them, "I know my first name is Stephen," and tried to remember his last name and birthday. By the next morning, both boys were back with their families. Parnell was arrested. Though he had a past record from 1951, he was only charged for taking the boys. He got 7 years but served just 5. Murphy and Poorman were also charged. Mathias was never arrested. Because of legal gaps, Parnell wasn't charged for the years of mistreatment. Stephen returned home on March 2, 1980. The media was everywhere, but Stephen had changed. He was now 14, struggled in school, used marijuana, and eventually dropped out. His father didn't believe he needed more help, and Stephen never shared the full story. In 1985, he married Jody Edmondson. They had 2 kids, He worked at a pizza place, gave safety talks, and joined a local church. In 1989, a TV miniseries called I Know My First Name is Stephen aired. Stephen helped with the production and had a small role. It reached over 40 million viewers. That same year, just before the Emmy Awards, Stephen died in a motorcycle accident at age 24. The driver fled, but later got only 3 months in jail. About 500 people came to his funeral. Timothy White, then 14, was one of the pallbearers. Years later, Stephen's brother Kerry was arrested in 1999 for the deaths of 4 women. He remains on death row. In 2004, Parnell was caught trying to arrange for another child and was sentenced to 25 years to life. He died in prison in 2008. Timothy White later became a deputy but passed away in 2010 at age 35. That same year, a statue of Stephen and Timothy was placed in Mercedes, showing their escape, a moment that changed both of their lives forever. It was February 10, 1996, in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. 14-year-old Tanya Nicole Catch vanished from her father's home. Her father, Jerry, thought she had just run away again like before, but this time she didn't come back. What no one knew was that Tanya hadn't run away. She had been manipulated by 38-year-old Thomas Jose, the school security guard at Cornell Middle School. Tanya was having a hard time. She was bullied at school, struggling to adjust, and didn't get along with her father's girlfriend. Jose took notice. As a staff member, he had access to her and began pulling her out of class under the excuse of wanting to talk. He gave her attention she wasn't getting elsewhere and slowly gained her trust. Then one day, after catching her skipping class, he kissed her. Over time, he convinced her to leave her life behind and live with him. On February 10th, she did exactly that. Jose took Tanya to a hairstylist friend, Judy Sokol, who dyed her hair and let her stay at her place for a few weeks. After that, he brought her into the home he shared with his parents and adult son. From that point on, Tanya was forced to live under the name Nikki Allen. He snuck her into his bedroom and kept her there for the next 4 years. She wasn't allowed to leave the room, not even to use the bathroom. She used a bucket instead. She was allowed to bathe only at night twice a week when the rest of the house was asleep. Jose brought her food, usually sandwiches, a banana, and soda, and warned her never to make noise. She passed the time quietly, reading or listening to music with headphones. Jose controlled everything. He often threatened her, saying if his family found out, he would harm her or throw her body in the river. Tanya believed him. He even forced her to record the mistreatment on a calendar as part of her daily life. Because Tanya had a history of running away, the police didn't see her case as unusual. Jose wasn't questioned. No one in the house knew she was upstairs. In 2000, 4 years after hiding her, Jose introduced Tanya to his family as his girlfriend, Nikki. She was now 18 and he allowed her to go outside, but only under strict rules. Tanya later said she was so manipulated that she didn't realize escape was possible. She began working part-time at a convenience store, JJ's Deli Mart, where she met the owners, Joe and Janet Sparico. Their kindness made her reflect on her own situation. What she experienced wasn't care. It was control. One day on March 20th, 2006, Tanya finally opened up to Joe. Through tears, she told him her real name and that she had been missing for 10 years. Joe immediately contacted the police. That same day, Tanya was found in Jose's home and taken to the station where she reunited with her father. They returned home and celebrated with cake, but things weren't as simple as they seemed. Though Tanya was welcomed back at first, her relationship with her father and stepmother later broke down. They doubted parts of her story. She eventually became estranged from them but reconnected with her mother, who supported her emotionally and helped her restart her life. Tanya suffered lasting injuries from her captivity. She needed multiple surgeries and deals with chronic pain. In 2011, she published her memoir, Memoir of a Milk Carton Kid. The book became a bestseller and helped her share her experience. She met Carl McCrum in 2008 and married him in 2018. He's been a steady presence in her life. Tanya even got to attend a prom at age 31, something she once only dreamed about. She now speaks publicly about grooming and trauma. In 2024, Lifetime released a film based on her life. Tanya still lives just 15 minutes from Jose, who served 15 years in prison and is now a registered offender. She fears seeing him again, but she's no longer silent. Her story, voice, and strength continue to speak for those who can't.